Welcome to Earthology. Tonight, we drift to the farthest edge of the known world, to a place of such silence that it seems the planet itself has fallen into meditation. Beyond the restless oceans and the green continents, beyond the reach of nearly all life, there lies a vast and sleeping continent of white. It is a world almost entirely made of memory, ice upon ice, pressing down through millions of years. This is Antarctica, a place of mystery, of myth, of science, and of reflection. A mirror for our imagination and for our need to understand the unknown. Here, the air is so pure, cuts like glass. The wind, unbroken by trees or cities, moves like a living thing. The temperature can fall below -50 degrees, and the storms, sudden, white, and absolute, erase everything in moments. Nearly all of it is hidden beneath a sheet of ice that in places is more than 3 miles thick. Entire mountain ranges are entombed there, unseen by human eyes. And yet, in that stillness, we keep searching. Antarctica has always pulled at the human mind, not just as a physical frontier, but as a kind of mirror to our curiosity. Every civilization, in every age, has imagined a final place beyond the maps, a land at the edge of knowledge. In ancient times, mapmakers filled the uncharted southern hemisphere with dragons, gods, and the words terra australis incognita, the unknown southern land. Centuries later, explorers would sail into the blinding fog, hoping to find that imagined place. Many never returned. Those who did spoke of waters filled with floating mountains of ice, of strange lights in the sky, of the ocean itself seeming to end. The discovery of Antarctica in the early 19th century was not just a geographical triumph. It was a symbolic one. Humanity reaching the literal end of the earth and finding, instead of paradise, a world of frozen desolation. Yet the discovery only deepened the mystery. For here was a continent larger than Europe, lying beneath a crown of eternal snow, and no one knew what it truly was. Beneath those kilometers of ice might lie forests, fossils, even lost histories of climates and species long vanished. And perhaps something more, the hidden history of ourselves. In August 1946, as the world recovered from the devastation of the Second World War, a new expedition set sail toward this frozen frontier. Its leader was Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd, one of America's most celebrated explorers, and among the first humans ever to fly over both the North and South Poles. Byrd was a figure of his time, part scientist, part soldier, part visionary. He had seen the Earth from heights that few could imagine, and he believed that knowledge was not just power, but peace. In the aftermath of global war, Antarctica seemed the ideal symbol of a new age of exploration, a continent untouched by borders or armies, where nations could work together in the name of discovery. His mission, officially, was called Operation Highjump. It was the largest Antarctic expedition in history. 13 ships, 23 aircraft, and more than 4,700 men. For 4 months, from December 1946 to March 1947, they would chart coastlines, test cold weather equipment, and identify possible sites for permanent bases. It was a scientific and logistical undertaking, unlike anything before it, but it was also military. The Navy wanted to know how aircraft and personnel could operate in such extreme conditions. The world, divided between superpowers, was entering the era of the Cold War, and Antarctica was a strategic unknown. For most, Operation Highjump was a feat of engineering and endurance. For others, it became something else, a seed of myth. Over the decades that followed, whispers began to grow, stories that Admiral Byrd had encountered something extraordinary on the ice. Accounts surfaced, not in official logs, but in alleged private diaries, writings said to have been suppressed by the government and rediscovered after his death. In these tales, Byrd spoke of flying beyond the South Pole and seeing a temperate land, green and luminous, filled with strange structures and a radiant city made of crystal. He wrote it was said of being guided by disc-shaped craft of being brought before a being he called the Master, who warned him of humanity's destructive path of nuclear weapons and the fragility of Earth as balance. It is a beautiful and haunting story, and it has never been proven true. Historians agree that there is no verified secret diary. The tale appears to have emerged long after Byrd's time, spreading through books and documentaries devoted more to wonder than to evidence. But it persists. Why? Because even when we know a story may not be literal, we feel what it means. Admiral Byrd's myth speaks to a yearning older than any expedition, the dream that within the earth, or beyond its frozen gates, there is another world, kinder and wiser than our own. It is the same dream that fills our mythologies, of hidden realms beneath mountains, of gods beneath the sea, of paradise lost and waiting to be found. In that sense, the so-called inner earth is not a place of tunnels and caverns, but a metaphor, the human desire to find light within darkness, civilization within chaos, meaning beneath the surface. In the middle of the 20th century, as science revealed more of the planet's structure, its crust, mantle, and molten core, the old idea of a hollow earth faded from serious discussion. But in the realm of imagination, it never died. Writers and philosophers had played with it for centuries. In 1692, astronomer Edmund Halley, yes, the one who gave his name to Halley's Comet, speculated that the Earth might consist of concentric shells, each capable of supporting life. Later, in the 19th century, explorers such as John Cleves Symmes Jr. proposed that great openings existed at the poles, leading into vast inner lands. Symmes even petitioned Congress to fund an expedition to find them. Though the idea was dismissed, it captured the public imagination. And so when Admiral Byrd's real expeditions reached the poles, the myth simply merged with reality. Science and story became intertwined, as they so often are. Because science tells us what is, but stories remind us why we look. Even today, Antarctica remains largely unseen. Beneath its endless plains of snow lie mountains as tall as the Alps, lakes sealed beneath ice for millions of years, and perhaps entire ecosystems unknown to science. Lake Vostok, buried nearly 4 kilometers below the surface, is one of the largest subglacial lakes on Earth, roughly the size of Lake Ontario. It has been isolated from the atmosphere for at least 15 million years. When Russian scientists drilled into it in the early 2000s, they discovered microorganisms, proof that even in eternal darkness, life endures. To scientists, this is more than curiosity. It's a glimpse into other worlds, moons like Europa or Enceladus, where liquid oceans might lie beneath crusts of ice. Studying Antarctica is like studying the cosmos. It reveals how resilient, how adaptable life can be. But the human mind is not satisfied with microbes. We imagine ruins, structures, civilizations. We ask whether something once thrived here, something lost to the ages, now buried beneath ice as deep as time. The idea that Antarctica might once have been green is not fantasy. Geological evidence shows that tens of millions of years ago, the continent was covered in forests. Fossilized leaves and wood fragments lie trapped beneath glaciers. Scientists have even found the remains of ferns and flowering plants. Antarctica once drifted closer to the equator, part of the supercontinent Gondwana. Over millions of years, tectonic motion carried it southward until it became the frozen pole we know today. The ice itself is a chronicle of that transformation, a library of ancient atmospheres. When scientists drill deep cores into the ice, they are reading history written in air bubbles and dust, layer upon layer, year upon year. Each flake that falls on Antarctica is a fragment of memory. And so, when people speak of lost civilizations beneath the ice, of Atlantis or alien temples, they are, perhaps unknowingly, speaking to something true. Not factual, but emotional. the knowledge that worlds have been lost again and again through time and change. We know of floods that reshaped continents, of ice ages that buried valleys, of meteor impacts that ended species. We are the children of catastrophe. Our myths remember what our history forgets. The flood stories found in the Bible, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in the myths of the Maya and the Hindus and the Greeks, they all echo some memory of real disaster. They are our attempt to make sense of the Earth's own cycles of destruction and renewal. When people say Antarctica might be the resting place of Atlantis, they are not describing geography. They are describing longing, the hope that somewhere, preserved in the stillness of ice, there remains proof that humanity once reached heights of wisdom and beauty that we have lost. That longing is as old as civilization. The philosopher Plato wrote of Atlantis not as history, but as allegory, a vision of a society undone by its own pride. Yet the idea of an ancient, advanced world swallowed by nature has never left us. We search for it not just in Antarctica, but in every ruin, every ocean trench, every corner of space. Because Atlantis is not a place. It is a mirror, showing us what we fear to become and what we hope to find again. For modern scientists, the mysteries of Antarctica are no less profound. They lie not in myths of lost cities, but in the hidden physics of the planet. Beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet, radar imaging has revealed vast mountain ranges, the Gamburtsev Mountains, completely concealed beneath the ice. Their peaks rise more than 10,000 feet, yet they have never seen sunlight. No one knows exactly how they formed. Further below lie magnetic anomalies, regions where the Earth's magnetic field behaves in strange ways, possibly due to mineral deposits or ancient meteor impacts. To some, these anomalies are reminders of how little we still understand of the planet's interior. Even with satellites and supercomputers, most of Antarctica remains unmeasured, unphotographed, unknown. There are valleys so cold that carbon dioxide can freeze into dry ice, and others where geothermal heat melts glaciers from beneath, creating hidden rivers. To walk there, or even to imagine it, is to step into deep time. And yet, even here, human imagination builds new myths. Satellite images showing geometric shapes in the ice become pyramids. Natural crevasses appear as entrances. Photographs of shadows become craft. But beneath each story lies the same impulse, to make meaning from mystery. The wind never stops in Antarctica. It circles the continent endlessly, moving clockwise around the pole like a memory that cannot be released. In that ceaseless motion lies something deeply human, our restlessness, our searching. Every age has its myths of the unknown. Once they were monsters at the edges of maps. Later, they were gods beneath the ground, or civilizations lost beneath the sea. Today, they are UFOs beneath the ice. But what unites them all is not deception, it is wonder. Antarctica does not need aliens or hidden empires to be extraordinary. Its reality is far stranger and more profound than fiction. A continent of frozen storms and living light, of ancient air and buried mountains, of time itself turned to stone. And yet, we keep dreaming, because the ice keeps secrets, and so do we. Admiral Byrd returned from Operation Highjump a changed man, not because he had encountered otherworldly beings or stumbled into an entrance to the Earth's core, but because he had faced the immensity of nature and the limits of human ambition. He had seen a landscape that could destroy steel ships with ice, where machinery froze solid in minutes, and where even the strongest men began to understand the meaning of insignificance. The expedition, in practical terms, had achieved much. It mapped hundreds of thousands of square miles, tested equipment, and gathered data that would guide future Antarctic missions. But in the public imagination, it became something far more mysterious. Soon after Byrd's return, reports surfaced that he had spoken cryptically of a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Some interpreted this as a warning about the Soviet Union's growing power. Others, especially in later decades, took it literally as evidence of aircraft not of this earth. The lines blurred between historical record and legend. Operation Highjump, like many human undertakings at the edge of the known world, entered the twilight space between fact and story, a place where the frozen landscape of Antarctica merged with the frozen landscape of the imagination. And perhaps that is where it belongs, because to explore is not only to seek, but to dream. Human beings have always looked downward as much as upward. The sky inspires us, but so does the idea of a world beneath, an inverse heaven, a place of origins and mysteries. In ancient Greece, philosophers imagined subterranean realms where souls journeyed after death. In Norse myth, Yggdrasil, the world tree, stretched its roots into hidden worlds of giants and spirits. In Buddhist cosmology, there are underworlds not of punishment, but of transformation. The idea of a hollow earth, a vast inner world beneath our feet, is only the latest echo of that much older pattern. In the 17th and 18th centuries, long before satellites or seismic instruments, the Earth's interior was largely a matter of speculation. Some believed it to be solid. Others thought it hollow, with layers of atmosphere and even its own inner sun. A few proposed that entrances existed at the poles, where explorers might one day descend into vast, temperate lands. The scientist Edmund Halley, best known for his comet, imagined the Earth as a series of nested spheres, like Russian dolls, each glowing faintly and perhaps sustaining life. Later, in the early 1800s, American thinker John Cleves Symmes Jr. took the idea further, publicly declaring that he would find these openings and enter them. His followers even petitioned the government for funds to send a ship. They were never granted, but the story spread. Newspapers printed speculative maps of the inner world. Novelists used it as metaphor, a stage for utopias, lost races, and moral fables. By the time Admiral Byrd's expeditions reached the poles, the idea of hidden worlds beneath the ice had become part of popular culture. So when rumors surfaced that Byrd had seen something wondrous, it was almost inevitable that people would connect it to that old dream. In truth, Byrd's actual writings were filled with wonder, not of aliens or crystal cities, but of nature itself. He once described Antarctica as a clean, white page on which the story of the future will be written. Those words, poetic and humble, remind us that the real magic of discovery is not in finding other civilizations, but in seeing our own reflection in the unknown. Still, the myths continued to evolve. In the late 20th century, whispers emerged of ancient structures buried deep beneath the ice, massive octagonal formations, metallic halls, even pyramids rising from the snow. Some stories came from anonymous whistleblowers, describing missions to investigate impossible ruins or bases of unknown origin. There were tales of temperatures far warmer inside these supposed chambers, of walls etched with symbols, of glowing green light without source. But when stripped of speculation, these accounts often trace back to natural features, rock formations, crevasses, shadows, or optical illusions amplified by imagination. And yet the fascination remains. Why are we drawn to the idea of something built beneath the ice? A civilization hidden, ancient, and perhaps wiser than our own? Partly because ice is time. It conceals and preserves. Underneath Antarctica's glaciers, scientists have found the remains of entire forests. The sediments tell stories of tropical plants, freshwater rivers, and ecosystems that thrived long before humans existed. If the continent could change so completely, from jungle to desert of ice, then perhaps it could also conceal the memory of worlds we can barely imagine. The myth of the ancient builders beneath the South Pole is, in a sense, an expression of awe at geological time itself. The idea that civilizations rise, fall, and vanish, sometimes under waves, sometimes under ice, feels both tragic and inevitable. It is how we process the impermanence of our own world. We imagine hidden ruins because we know, one day, our own cities may be the same. Long before the first explorers reached Antarctica, ancient myths already spoke of cataclysms, floods, fires, and gods who rebuilt the world after each destruction. In the Bible, there is the story of Noah's flood. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells of Utnapishtim, who survived a great deluge sent by the gods. The Greeks told of Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, who built an ark to escape the wrath of Zeus. Across the world, from the mountains of Peru to the islands of the Pacific, versions of this same memory persist, of a world before the flood, a time of brightness and knowledge, followed by sudden ruin. When the philosopher Plato wrote of Atlantis, he placed it in that same cycle of rise and fall. He described a great island empire, beyond the Pillars of Heracles, rich in power and technology, that became corrupted by greed and was swallowed by the sea in a single night. Plato never claimed this as literal history. It was a moral parable, a reflection on hubris, on the fragility of civilization. But over the centuries, readers searched for it on maps, convinced that myth must be rooted in truth. Some pointed west to the mid-Atlantic ridge, others north to the Azores. And in more recent centuries, some turned their gaze south to the vast, uncharted continent buried in ice. Could Atlantis, they asked, have been Antarctica before a cataclysm shifted the poles? The notion gained attention in the 20th century, when new technologies allowed scientists to peer beneath the glaciers using radar and satellite imagery. Strange patterns appeared, mountain shapes, geometric ridges, and speculation ignited once again. To geologists, these were natural landforms. To others, they were proof of a civilization lost to time. But the deeper question is not whether such a civilization existed. It is why the idea feels so resonant. Because Atlantis, whether under the sea or the ice, is less about geography than about memory. It is the collective sense that humanity has forgotten something essential about itself. Perhaps what we call myth is the Earth remembering for us. Science, too, has its own mysteries in Antarctica. In the early 21st century, researchers discovered vast magnetic anomalies beneath the ice of East Antarctica, regions where the planet S-field behaves unexpectedly, hinting at structures deep below the crust. Some scientists believe these patterns may mark the site of ancient meteor impacts. Others suspect unusual concentrations of metallic minerals. To the imaginative mind, such anomalies suggest something even stranger, the traces of ancient architecture or technologies varied by time. But in truth, the natural world is more enigmatic than any fiction we could invent. Beneath the central plateau of East Antarctica lies Lake Vostok, sealed beneath 4 kilometers of ice. For millions of years, it has existed in complete isolation, its waters untouched by sunlight or atmosphere. When samples were finally drawn from it, they revealed traces of microbial life, tiny organisms surviving in darkness and pressure unimaginable to us. This discovery alone reshaped our understanding of where life can exist. It became a model for studying other icy worlds, Europa, the moon of Jupiter, or Enceladus, the moon of Saturn, where similar subglacial oceans may harbor life. In that sense, the true alien worlds are not beneath the Earth, but beyond it. Yet they are reflections of the same mystery. Each frozen sea, each hidden lake, each glacial cave is a window into resilience, the stubborn persistence of life even in the coldest, most impossible places. Sometimes what we call mystery is simply humility. Antarctica reminds us how little we know, not only about our planet, but about our own perception. When we stare at satellite images and see shapes that look like pyramids, perhaps it is our mind seeking order in chaos. When we imagine cities beneath the ice, perhaps it is our longing to find company in the vast silence of the universe. Even in modern times, stories circulate of sightings near research stations, lights that move against the wind, strange sounds carried through the air. Some are explained as atmospheric phenomena, optical illusions, or scientific equipment. Others remain unaccounted for, lingering as small, unprovable mysteries. But to the people who have lived on that continent, even for a season, the real mystery is not in the sky or under the ground. It is in the feeling of standing there. To look across hundreds of miles of ice, where nothing moves and nothing grows, is to glimpse something close to eternity. The scientists who work there often describe a paradoxical peace, a stillness so complete that it feels alive. They speak of the way sound changes, how footsteps vanish, how even the breath feels ancient. Some call it the sound of the earth thinking. Perhaps that is why so many myths converge on this place. Antarctica is the perfect canvas for our imagination, a blankness that invites projection. It is untouched enough to contain anything we wish to believe, yet real enough to humble us. In its silence, we hear ourselves. Every few decades, new discoveries ignite the world's fascination again. Images of geometric shadows called pyramids, reports of anomalies in magnetic readings, claims of crashed objects visible in satellite photos. In 2018, one such image, a long, straight scar across the ice, was described as the trace of something that had traveled from pole to pole in minutes, leaving a contrail spanning the entire planet. Scientists pointed out that atmospheric currents and cloud formations can create such illusions. Yet the myth spread anyway, like a spark in dry grass. Because what these stories reveal is not deception, but devotion. Humanity cannot resist the pull of mystery. We need the unknown the way lungs need air. We are creatures built to wonder. And so, Antarctica becomes both a stage and a mirror, a place where our longing for discovery meets our fear of insignificance. It is not simply a continent of ice, but a continent of questions. What lies beneath? What came before? What, if anything, watches us from the deep? Science can measure temperature, density, and time, but it cannot measure awe. And awe is what the ice gives us. In the frozen stillness of Antarctica, the past and future seem to merge. Every snowflake that falls becomes a record of the air in which it formed. Every layer of ice captures a year of history, volcanoes, fires, breaths of ancient winds. When researchers drill deep into the ice, they are not only studying climate, they are reading the autobiography of the planet. And somewhere within that story, hidden beneath 3 miles of frozen light, there may still lie traces of the world before us. Forests now fossilized, mountains still unborn, a long, patient memory of Earth. There is a certain symmetry in the human imagination. When we encounter something vast, we fill it with meaning. When we stand before the unknown, we give it shape. And when we stare at the blank expanse of Antarctica, endless white, motionless and bare, we see somehow the outline of pyramids. The notion began quietly, in photographs taken from satellites orbiting high above the Earth. In the early 21st century, some researchers noticed mountain formations that appeared strangely geometric. Their slopes, viewed from certain angles, seemed to form perfect triangles, meeting in points like the pyramids of Giza. To scientists, they were simply nunataks, peaks of rock protruding from the ice, sculpted by wind and erosion. But to others, they were evidence of something else, the remnants of an ancient civilization, older than Egypt, older perhaps than history itself. On the internet, images of these peaks spread with captions that hinted at revelation. Commentators claimed that if the ice sheet were to melt, it might reveal a network of massive structures, the oldest monuments on Earth. Some suggested they were the prototypes, the master pyramids, from which all others were copied. It was an alluring thought that the geometry of human civilization might have originated here, on the most remote and lifeless continent of all. But the reality is both simpler and more profound. Nature, too, builds with symmetry. Crystals, mountains, snowflakes, all obey the same mathematics. The triangle, that ancient symbol of balance and ascent, is not only a human idea. It is a form written into the planet itself. The pyramids we build are reflections of that pattern, not the other way around. And yet, the myth of Antarctic pyramids remains powerful because it touches something deep in us, the feeling that knowledge has been lost, that history hides a deeper story. We long to believe that civilization is not a single straight line but a cycle, that once, long ago, a world of wisdom existed, only to be buried by ice and time. In that longing, ancient texts often appear like clues. Far from the ice, in the deserts of Egypt, lies the Temple of Edfu, a monument carved with thousands of inscriptions describing the creation of the world. Within its hieroglyphs, priests recorded a memory of gods who came from the sky and founded the first sacred island, a place where the earth itself began. The texts speak of the island of the egg, the birthplace of civilization, surrounded by the waters of chaos. Upon this island, divine beings, the builders, the sages, and the mysterious Shebtu raised the first temples and brought order to the world. In time, according to the inscriptions, the island was destroyed by flood and fire. The surviving gods journeyed away, leaving behind blueprints for the temples of Egypt, so that humanity might remember. To the ancient Egyptians, these stories were not fantasy. They were sacred history, a way of explaining creation, loss, and rebirth. Some modern writers have wondered whether these gods might represent survivors of an earlier civilization, perhaps the same one that inspired Plato's Atlantis. They note that the description of the island of the egg, a place encircled by water, destroyed by cataclysm, could mirror the memory of a real event like the melting of an ice age or a shift of continents. If so, might the island have been Antarctica before it froze? It is a romantic notion, the idea that beneath the polar ice lies the original cradle of civilization. But geology tells another story, that the ice began forming there more than 30 million years ago, long before humans or even our earliest ancestors walked the earth. And yet, these timelines do not diminish the poetry of the myth, because myths are not records of events. They are records of meaning. The Edfu texts, with their tales of divine builders and forgotten islands, speak to the same human truth that drives exploration, the wish to find our beginnings. Whether in stone temples or in the ice of Antarctica, we are always searching for the first story, the one that explains why we are here at all. If the pyramids of the desert point upward, then the ice of the south points inward to contemplation. Standing before the frozen continent, the modern explorer experiences something the ancients might have called sublime. It is beauty mixed with terror, wonder laced with humility. The scale of it defies language. Nearly 98% of Antarctica is covered by ice, some layers so ancient they predate the human species. The average elevation of the continent is higher than that of any other landmass on Earth, and its winds can reach 200 miles an hour. In some regions, the temperature has dropped below minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze breath in midair. And yet, beneath all that stillness, there is motion. The ice is not static. It flows, almost imperceptibly, toward the sea. It creaks, groans, and shifts, cracking like thunder across a plain of silence. It is the slowest river in the world. Deep below, volcanoes still burn. Geothermal vents melt the undersides of glaciers, creating vast caverns of water and rock. There are mountains taller than the Alps that no human eye has seen, and valleys so deep they sink below sea level. To walk upon that landscape is to walk on top of deep time, the accumulation of millions of winters, each frozen upon the last. No wonder we imagine what might be buried there. In 2018, a retired Navy flight engineer recounted his years working with the U.S. Antarctic Development Squadron. He spoke of strange lights seen darting between mountain peaks, of magnetic anomalies that caused instruments to fail, of a no-fly zone, guarded by secrecy. He told of glimpsing, through the window of his aircraft, what looked like a vast circular opening in the ice, a dark descent into the earth itself. Officially, there was no such entrance. The story was anecdotal, unverifiable, but it joined the growing constellation of legends that orbit Antarctica like distant stars, whispers of hidden bases, secret research, and encounters with the unknown. For some, these tales are literal. For others, they are allegory, signs of humanity's constant tension between curiosity and fear. Because what we call the unknown is never just a place on a map. It is a reflection of our own limits. The further we push into it, the more we discover how small we are. Modern technology has allowed us to see what was once invisible. Satellites map the ice in exquisite detail. Radar penetrates miles below the surface. We can trace the movement of glaciers, measure the thickness of the crust, even detect subglacial rivers that flow for hundreds of miles beneath the frozen plain. And yet, the more we know, the more mysterious Antarctica becomes. In 2015, NASA announced a paradox. While parts of the West Antarctic ice sheet were melting rapidly, the ice in the east was actually growing, accumulating billions of tons of snow each year. Climate models struggled to explain the difference. Was it atmospheric circulation? Ocean currents? Something deeper? To those who seek meaning in anomalies, such contradictions invite imagination. Some writers proposed that hidden heat sources beneath the ice, geothermal activity, or even ancient machinery might be warming specific regions. Others spoke of secret installations, powered by technologies unknown to the world. But for scientists, the real explanation is far more humbling. The planet's climate is a complex, living system responding to forces that span oceans and centuries. What appears as mystery is often the intricate mathematics of nature itself, a pattern too large for us to see all at once. In that sense, Antarctica becomes a metaphor for knowledge itself. Every discovery reveals more questions. The closer we look, the less certain we become. It is easy to understand why people imagine other beings, gods, aliens, ancestors, dwelling beneath the ice. To look upon Antarctica is to look upon another world. Its landscape, barren and luminous, resembles the frozen moons of the outer solar system. Its silence feels cosmic. When scientists study the microbes that live in subglacial lakes, they are, in essence, studying how life might survive elsewhere in the universe. When they drill into the oldest ice, they are touching air that was breathed by creatures extinct for millions of years. In this way, Antarctica is both ancient and futuristic, a bridge between past and possibility. To imagine extraterrestrial visitors, there is simply to give shape to that sense of otherness. The aliens are not necessarily beings from the stars, but symbols of knowledge beyond our reach. When the story of Admiral Byrd meeting the Master warns of humanity's destructive power, it is not an alien speaking. It is our own conscience, dressed in myth. The message is simple, that we are caretakers of a fragile world, and that beneath every frontier lies a responsibility to preserve, not conquer. For thousands of years, the earth has spoken to us in symbols, through mountains, storms, and ice. We have answered with stories. The pyramids of Egypt rise like frozen prayers. The myths of lost continents remind us of impermanence. The tales of inner worlds and hollow earths express our desire for refuge, a hidden sanctuary untouched by our mistakes. And Antarctica, blank, white, endless, gathers all of those stories into one. It is at once heaven and underworld, memory and oblivion, creation and destruction. Perhaps that is why it feels sacred, even to those who do not believe in sacred things. There is a purity to its silence. It asks nothing. It gives no answers. It simply exists, immense, indifferent, eternal. To stand there, even in imagination, is to sense the smallness of every question, and yet to feel the necessity of asking them anyway. That is what makes us human. Not certainty, but wonder. Some say the Earth is alive, that its continents move like slow heartbeats, that its crust breathes heat from its core. If that is true, then Antarctica is the planet's sleeping face, serene and dreaming. Beneath its ice, there may be forgotten rivers and mountains that once touched the sun. Above it, the aurora dances, curtains of green and violet light that ripple across the polar sky. Scientists can explain the aurora as the interaction of solar particles with magnetic fields. But to witness it, to see the heavens spill color across the frozen horizon, is to feel the ancient awe that first gave birth to myth. It is in those moments that one understands science and myth are not enemies. They are two languages for the same feeling, the recognition of mystery. Antarctica teaches us that there are places where both belong. If Antarctica is the body of the Earth dreaming, then science is the act of listening to its sleep. For decades now, the instruments of discovery, satellites, radar, sensors, and probes, have tuned themselves to the continent's long, glacial heartbeat. Each measurement, each reading, is a whisper from a time before memory. When scientists extract the core of ice from the bed of a glacier, what they hold in their hands is air older than civilization. Tiny bubbles, trapped for hundreds of thousands of years, carry within them the breath of prehistoric forests, the exhalations of volcanoes, the chemical traces of ancient skies. Those air bubbles speak of a planet in motion, warming, cooling, breathing, changing. They tell us that Antarctica was once green, that it saw ferns and rivers, that its mountains once echoed with rain instead of wind. And then, slowly, the world tilted, and the warmth retreated. Snow fell and did not melt. Seasons froze into permanence. It is humbling to realize that what we call ice is not just frozen water, but frozen time. Each layer beneath our feet is a page in the autobiography of Earth. The deeper we drill, the further we travel, not through space, but through time. In that way, scientists are the quietest kind of explorers. They do not seek treasure or power or revelation. They seek understanding. They descend not into caverns, but into data, into numbers that reveal the rhythm of life across epochs. To them, the real mystery is not what lies beneath the ice, but what the ice itself remembers. And yet, even in the most rational moments of inquiry, there lingers a feeling that the continent is watching. Antarctica has a way of making the observer feel observed. Perhaps it is the vastness, or the silence, or the way light behaves there. The horizon is an illusion. Distances dissolve. The landscape is so pure that it distorts perception. Sound travels differently. Time seems to slow. Those who spend months at research stations often speak of strange dreams, of heightened awareness, of a sense of presence. Psychologists call it the Antarctic effect, the combination of isolation, monotony, and sensory extremes that alters consciousness. But in another sense, it is something deeper. To be surrounded by so much stillness is to encounter the edges of one's own mind. The philosopher Edmund Burke once said that the sublime is not merely beauty, it is beauty combined with terror. It is what we feel when confronted with something vast enough to dissolve our sense of self. Antarctica is the sublime made physical. It dwarfs us, and in doing so, restores perspective. No wonder so many of our myths project divinity there. Gods, masters, ancient beings, hidden guardians. They are our own emotions, magnified and given form. When Admiral Byrd wrote of feeling that humanity must learn to live in peace or perish, he was not repeating the words of otherworldly voices. He was expressing the insight that comes to anyone who stands before a continent of pure silence, that all our conflicts are smaller than a single glacier, and that nature endures long after our wars are forgotten. The human brain evolved on savannas and in forests. We are creatures of color and motion, attuned to the shimmer of leaves, the rhythm of waves, the hum of life. To find ourselves on a continent of white emptiness, where nothing moves, where the sky and ground blur into one, is to step outside everything we were built to understand. So we fill that emptiness with stories. It is not a failure of reason. It is an act of survival. Our minds need pattern, meaning, continuity. When faced with the vast, we weave imagination across it like a bridge. Every tale of hidden bases, buried temples, or luminous beings beneath the ice is, in its own way, a bridge, an attempt to make sense of the incomprehensible. Perhaps we should not judge these stories, but listen to what they reveal about us. They tell us that we are uncomfortable with silence. They tell us that we would rather populate the void than accept its solitude. And they tell us, most of all, that we are desperate for connection, to each other, to the past, to something greater than ourselves. In that light, even the most elaborate legends become a kind of poetry. They are humanity dreaming aloud, imagining that the unknown loves us back. In modern times, as satellites and technology have erased the blank spaces from maps, Antarctica remains the one true frontier. It is the last place on Earth where the old phrase, "Here be dragons," still feels possible. But the dragons we find, there are not monsters, they are questions. Why does this continent, so barren and empty, hold such magnetic power over the human imagination? Why do we keep returning to it, not only with ships and machines, but with dreams? Perhaps it is because Antarctica represents both extremes of our nature, our thirst for knowledge and our need for mystery. We are explorers by instinct, yet philosophers by heart. We long to know, but we also long to wonder. The ice offers both. It conceals and reveals. It gives us answers in the form of ancient air, and at the same time withholds the secrets buried beneath miles of frozen stone. It is, in a sense, a dialogue between revelation and restraint, a reminder that not everything is meant to be seen. At McMurdo Station, the largest research base in Antarctica, scientists live in a strange rhythm of light and darkness. For half the year, the sun never sets. For the other half, it never rises. Days stretch into endless brightness, then collapse into a darkness so complete that stars appear sharper than thought. In those months when the world above is frozen and silent, the only sound is the pulse of machinery, the hum of generators, the hiss of wind, the quiet conversations of people who have chosen to live at the end of the earth. They are the custodians of knowledge, meteorologists, glaciologists, astrophysicists, studying everything from subatomic particles to climate patterns. Some conduct experiments in neutrino detection, looking for invisible particles streaming through the planet from deep space. Others map the cosmic microwave background, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang. In a poetic sense, they are listening to the universe through the ear of the earth. The ice, pure and crystalline, acts as a lens and amplifier. Beneath the surface, detectors buried in the snow can sense flashes of light caused by particles older than the stars themselves. So perhaps, in a quiet way, the old myths were right. Antarctica is a gateway, not to an inner world of civilizations, but to the outer cosmos. Beneath its ice, we glimpse the very beginning of everything. There is something sacred about that, not in the religious sense, but in the sense of reverence. To study Antarctica is to study humility. Every measurement is a confession of ignorance, every discovery a reminder of how small our perspective is. The ice does not care for our ambitions. It moves to its own rhythm, shaped by the slow heartbeat of the planet. Whether we are there or not, it flows, melts, and reforms, and yet it records us. Layers of soot from ancient fires, traces of nuclear tests, even microplastics carried by wind. All of it will one day be found in the ice, evidence of a species that reached every corner of its home. In that sense, the continent is writing our epitaph in advance, not as judgment, but as observation. There are places in Antarctica where the snow is so old that it has never known liquid water. The crystals there are relics of an atmosphere that existed before human history began. And there are other places, newly discovered, where warmth seeps up from below, geothermal pockets that create caverns of steam and life beneath the glaciers. Inside them, scientists have found bacteria thriving in isolation, feeding on minerals instead of sunlight. These organisms are neither ancient nor alien, yet they remind us of both. They are the bridge between worlds, proof that life can endure without sky, without seasons, without light. When we look at these microbes through microscopes, we are not only studying biology, we are studying persistence, the quiet refusal of life to surrender. It is the same persistence that drives us to explore, to question, to dream. All myths begin in observation. Someone sees a shadow move across the snow. Someone hears a sound in the wind that does not belong. Someone dreams of warmth beneath the ice. And from those small experiences, we build stories that reach across generations. The story of Admiral Byrd and his inner Earth is one such story. It was never about geography. It was about revelation, about the feeling of standing before something vast and unknown. When Byrd spoke of a great unknown land beyond the pole, perhaps he was describing not a physical place, but a psychological one, the landscape of awe itself. It is the same place we enter when we look up at the stars or down into the depths of the ocean. It is the border between knowledge and mystery. To explore that border is not madness. It is human nature. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "The only journey is the one within." Perhaps Antarctica is the planet's own version of that truth, a physical reflection of the inner journey. Beneath its surface lies not a hollow world, but the hollow within us, the space carved by curiosity, by wonder, by the need to know what lies beyond. Every time we project myths onto its ice, we are mapping that inner geography. The crystal cities, the lost civilizations, the ancient beings, these are all metaphors for ourselves, for our desire to evolve, to be wiser, to be forgiven. Antarctica holds no judgment, only silence. But in that silence, we find our reflection, and sometimes that is more terrifying than any alien encounter. The world is changing. The ice, once eternal, is melting faster each year. Vast shelves break away into the sea, drifting like white continents toward the north. Scientists study these collapses with urgency, for they signal not mythic cataclysm, but tangible, measurable change, the warming of the earth, the rising of the oceans, the reshaping of coastlines. In a cruel irony, the very place we filled with legends of lost worlds may soon reveal its real secrets as the ice retreats. And what we uncover will not be ancient temples or crystal cities, but fossils, sediments, and data, the record of a planet's patience and a species' impact. Perhaps, as we read those stories, we will realize that the true mystery was never what lies beneath the ice, but how we came to forget our responsibility to it. The myths may fade, but the lesson remains. We are not masters of the earth. We are part of its story. And like all stories, ours depends on how well we listen. The ice remembers everything. Each flake that falls carries with it a trace of the sky, the dust of deserts, the salt of oceans, the breath of forests. It settles quietly, joins the layers below, and becomes part of the planet's long memory. Over thousands of years, that memory deepens until it becomes ice, clear, dense, timeless. When we drill down through it, we are reading a chronicle written not in ink, but in silence. 1,000 years of rain, 10,000 years of snow, 100,000 years of wind. Every climate, every extinction, every breath of carbon and whisper of ash, all preserved in frozen light. Antarctica is not only a continent, it is an archive. It holds the memory of the world. The first explorers could not have known this. To them, it was simply the last blank space on the map, a challenge to endurance, a white abyss to be crossed and claimed. They did not imagine that beneath their boots lay the history of life itself. Only in the 20th century did we begin to understand how the ice speaks. Scientists learned that by analyzing trapped air bubbles, they could reconstruct past atmospheres. By measuring isotopes of oxygen, they could trace temperature shifts. Through ice cores taken from the Antarctic plateau, we have read 500,000 years of climate history, warm ages and ice ages, the slow rhythm of the planet's breathing. We learned that the Earth's climate is not static, but cyclical, that warmth and cold follow patterns written into the planet's orbit and tilt. And in those patterns, we saw ourselves. We saw that the rapid warming of our own age does not fit the rhythm of nature. It is faster, sharper, more chaotic. The ice became a mirror, showing us what we had done. The great paradox of Antarctica is that it is both eternal and fragile. It feels immutable, a continent of stone and ice, older than civilization, untouched by human hands. Yet it is also vulnerable to the smallest of changes. A rise of a few degrees, a shift in ocean currents, a pulse of carbon in the air. If the Antarctic ice sheet were to melt completely, sea levels would rise by nearly 200 feet. Cities would vanish. Coasts would redraw themselves. The world would become, once again, an archipelago of memory. And yet, even as we face that possibility, we continue to dream of what lies beneath. It is as if we cannot help but see apocalypse and revelation as twin reflections, the end of one world giving birth to the discovery of another. Perhaps that is the hidden poetry of our myths. They remind us that loss and discovery are the same movement of the tide. When the old stories spoke of floods, of continents swallowed by the sea, they were remembering what the ice now proves. The Earth has done this before. At the end of the last ice age, as glaciers melted, sea levels rose by hundreds of feet. Vast regions of the planet were drowned. Islands became mountains. Valleys became bays. Civilizations along ancient shorelines would have seen their worlds disappear in a single lifetime. The trauma of that transformation became myth. The Great Flood, the wrath of gods, the fall of golden ages. Now, thousands of years later, we live on the other side of that memory. But the pattern repeats, this time not by nature's rhythm, but by our own hand. In the ice, we can read the warning written in the past, that the Earth renews itself not gently, but by change. And yet, unlike our ancestors, we have the gift of foresight. We can see the pattern forming before it completes. We can choose how we respond. That is what makes Antarctica sacred, not for what it hides, but for what it teaches. It shows us the future in the language of the past. In the stillness of that continent, time feels circular. The ice forms, melts, and forms again. The winds move endlessly around the pole, like a slow celestial clock. Every so often, a storm will lift snow that fell 1,000 years ago, spin it into the air, and let it fall again, ancient meeting present, indistinguishable. It is a reminder that nothing on this planet is truly gone. It only changes form. The myths of lost worlds, of Atlantis, of the island of the egg, of the cities beneath the ice, all express that same truth. They are the mind's way of saying that what was lost might still exist, somewhere, somehow. Science tells us that continents drift, that climates shift, that species vanish and return in new shapes. Myth tells us the same story, only in a different tongue. One speaks in Veda, the other in dreams, and both are true. There is a kind of grace in realizing that the world does not need to be supernatural to be miraculous. Consider the Antarctic night, a season of darkness so complete that the stars seem to hang lower in the sky. The Milky Way spills across the heavens in a river of light. The aurora glows in green veils, shimmering across the horizon. For months, the sun does not rise. And yet, beneath the frozen surface, life endures. Fish with blood that never freezes, bacteria feeding on minerals, seals sleeping under the ice where the water stays warmer than the air. To live there is to live at the border of existence. And still, life finds a way. That, more than any legend of alien architects or buried empires, is the real mystery. The world's greatest secret is not what lies beneath the ice, but that life continues above it, despite everything. It is tempting to romanticize exploration, to imagine the polar expeditions as quests for glory and enlightenment. But those who have been there know better. Exploration is not about conquest. It is about surrender. To stand in Antarctica is to accept one's smallness. To walk across its endless plain is to feel the earth not as something we own, but as something we belong to. The explorer, the scientist, the dreamer, all are pilgrims in the same cathedral. The ice is the altar. The wind is the hymn. When Admiral Byrd wrote in his journal, "I am grateful for the privilege of living in this place," he was not writing as a conqueror, but as a witness. He understood what every explorer eventually learns, that the true discovery is not of new lands, but of new ways of seeing. The myths of hidden worlds, of inner earths, of beings watching from below, reveal more about us than about the planet. We imagine watchers because we long to be seen. We imagine ancient wisdom because we sense the limits of our own. In a world that feels increasingly fragile, we tell ourselves there must be guardians, civilizations older and wiser, protecting what we cannot. But perhaps the guardians we imagine are not beings at all. Perhaps they are forces, gravity, ice, time, the silent custodians of balance. They watch us not through eyes, but through consequence. When we alter the air, they respond with wind. When we warm the sea, they answer with meltwater. When we dig too deeply, they remind us that the earth is not hollow, but it is alive. If the myths of the past sought hidden masters beneath the earth, perhaps the myths of the future will look upward, to the ice shelves that break and drift, carrying pieces of continents into the sea. Each iceberg is a floating memory, a fragment of the planet's story cast loose to wander. It melts, joins the ocean, becomes rain, and falls again as snow. In this endless cycle, even destruction becomes part of creation. It is not a comforting thought, but it is a true one, that everything changes, and that change is the engine of beauty. One day, perhaps centuries from now, the ice will retreat. The mountains buried beneath it will see sunlight again. Rivers will flow where glaciers once stood. New forests will grow, and with them new myths. People of that far future may walk across valleys we can only imagine. They may find fossils of creatures we never knew, and traces of our own age, our bones, our machines, our brief spark of civilization. They may wonder who we were and what we believed. They may find our records and read our myths, and they may smile at how we imagined their world to be filled with secrets and gods. And perhaps they will understand that those stories were not delusions, but prayers that the earth would remember us kindly. Even now, as the wind howls across the polar plateau, the silence of Antarctica is not empty. It is full of voices, the creak of moving glaciers, the crack of icebergs calving into the sea, the low hum of the planet's magnetic pulse. If we listen carefully, those sounds form a kind of language, the slow, patient speech of the earth itself. It tells us that the world is ancient and alive, that it endures without our permission, that it will continue long after we are gone. But it also tells us that we are part of it. The carbon in our blood, the oxygen in our lungs, the water in our cells, all once passed through these glaciers, these storms, these oceans. We are not visitors to this planet. We are expressions of it. And so, when we stare into the white abyss of Antarctica and feel awe, what we are truly feeling is recognition. The ice is not separate from us. It is us, slowed down, purified, eternal. If there is a lesson in the myths of the South Pole, it is this: mystery is not something to be solved, but something to be honored. We do not need to find cities beneath the ice to know that the world is extraordinary. We only need to listen to it breathe. The secrets of Antarctica are not conspiracies or alien relics. They are reminders that knowledge is endless, that humility is wisdom, and that beauty often hides in silence. As the wind sweeps across the plateau and the aurora dances above, we remember that we too are part of that dance, fleeting, luminous, and full of questions. And perhaps that is enough. The ice will melt. It will freeze again. The world will change, as it always has. But wonder will remain. Because as long as there is something unseen, something beyond the reach of certainty, humanity will keep looking toward it, not out of fear, but out of love. Love for the mystery that makes us small. Love for the silence that holds our story. Love for the planet that, even in its coldest heart, still dreams of life. Antarctica is not a conspiracy. It is a mirror, showing us how curious, how fragile, and how wondrous we truly are. To speak of Antarctica is to speak of silence. But silence, here, is not emptiness. It is depth, the fullness of a world that has no need for sound. The explorers who crossed its plains often described a strange awareness, as though they were moving across another planet. In that world of white and shadow, the mind changes. Every footstep becomes an act of faith. Every breath feels ancient. Even time behaves differently there. Without trees or stars to mark its passage, the days blur together. The light, so sharp and clean, makes distance uncertain. A mountain 100 miles away can seem close enough to touch. Antarctica is a world where the horizon deceives. It tempts the traveler forward, always promising revelation, always receding. And perhaps that is its most perfect metaphor. We move toward the horizon of understanding, but we never reach it. When scientists build their stations here, McMurdo, Amundsen-Scott, Vostok, Concordia, they do not come to conquer. They come to listen. Each experiment is a kind of prayer whispered into the wind. Detectors beneath the ice measure the smallest flashes of light from particles that pass through the planet without ever stopping. Seismic instruments record the tremors of distant earthquakes, letting us hear the heartbeat of continents. Radio telescopes point into the endless dark, listening for the first echoes of the universe. It is as if the Earth itself has become an instrument, and Antarctica its resonant chamber. The irony is that, at the farthest place from human habitation, we learn the most about what it means to be human. For what drives us to the poles is not necessity, but curiosity, the same instinct that led our ancestors to the edges of the known world, the same spark that sends probes into space. We are, at our core, a species of seekers. We walk toward the blank places not because we expect to find something there, but because the act of seeking gives us meaning. Sometimes, in that stillness, meaning feels closer than ever. Researchers wintering at the South Pole describe the months of darkness as both isolating and transcendent. Outside the station, the air freezes before it reaches the lungs. The stars blaze brighter than anywhere else on Earth. Inside, there is laughter, work, routine, small rituals to keep the spirit steady. They celebrate midwinter as a kind of quiet holiday, lighting candles, reading letters from home. It is a reminder that even in the loneliest place on Earth, warmth exists. That warmth of memory, of connection, is the same force that makes us imagine stories beneath the ice. Because myth, at its heart, is a way of staying warm. It is what we tell ourselves to endure the coldness of the unknown. Throughout history, every frontier we have reached, oceans, deserts, mountains, space, has inspired two parallel stories, one of science and one of wonder. The scientific story measures, observes, and records. It speaks in data, in precision. The mythic story breathes. It turns discovery into meaning, observation into revelation. Together, they create something neither could achieve alone: understanding. In the case of Antarctica, The two stories intertwine so closely that it can be hard to tell them apart. When explorers of the 19th century returned with tales of icebergs the size of cathedrals, of mirages that made mountains appear to float in the sky, the world called them poets. When scientists later explained those visions as light refraction in polar air, they called them physicists. But the awe was the same. Perhaps it has always been this way. Science as the evolution of wonder, wonder as the poetry of science. And Antarctica, vast and unknowable, is their meeting place. There is a quiet wisdom in the way the continent has been protected. In 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, declaring that this land, this last frontier, would belong to no one and to everyone. It would be devoted only to peace and research. Later, more nations joined, forming one of the most extraordinary agreements in human history. For more than 60 years, it has held. No weapons, no war, only science, cooperation, and care. In a world often divided by conflict, the frozen continent remains neutral, untouched by borders. It is, in a sense, humanity's best self, a reflection of what we could be if we valued knowledge over power. Perhaps that, too, is why it inspires myth. We imagine gods and hidden masters there because, for once, we have allowed ourselves to act as guardians rather than conquerors. We made of Antarctica what our ancestors once made of temples, a sanctuary. Yet even sanctuaries change. The ice is melting. Glaciers that stood for millennia are collapsing into the sea. When we look at satellite images of ice shelves breaking apart, we are not watching fantasy. We are watching the planet breathe faster, its pulse quicken. For the scientists who live there, each calving glacier is a kind of heartbreak, a reminder that nothing, not even silence, is immune to us. And yet, within that loss, there is still wonder. When a glacier cracks, the sound travels for miles, a deep, resonant groan that echoes like thunder beneath the surface. Some describe it as the voice of the earth itself, shifting in its sleep. If you stand close enough, you can feel it through your bones. It is a sound of power, but not of anger. It is the sound of transformation. Transformation is the constant theme of the planet. Nothing remains still, not even the ice. Beneath the surface, rivers of meltwater carve secret paths through stone. Volcanoes breathe warmth upward. Microbes adapt, evolve, persist. In those unseen depths, life continues, fragile, invisible, relentless. And perhaps that is what we truly seek when we speak of hidden worlds. Not other species or alien civilizations, but the reflection of our own persistence. We want to know that even in darkness, life endures. That even beneath miles of ice, something moves, something grows. It is hope disguised as legend. From time to time, new stories appear, of pyramids, of strange lights, of objects gliding beneath the frozen seas. They rise, shimmer for a while, then fade back into silence. But each one leaves a trace, like a footprint on snow. It would be easy to dismiss them as fantasy. But perhaps a better question is, what need do they fulfill? The answer may be simple. In a world where so much is known, we crave the unknown. We crave the possibility that the earth still has secrets left to share. Without mystery, knowledge becomes mechanical. Without imagination, discovery becomes routine. We need both, the known and the unknown, to remain fully human. Antarctica offers both in abundance. Sometimes the greatest discoveries begin as dreams. It was dreamers who first imagined that the poles hid lands of light. It was dreamers who charted seas without knowing what lay beyond them. And in a way, those dreams came true, not in the details, but in the spirit. Every myth, every legend, every impossible story about the ice leads us closer to a truth, that there is always more to learn, always more to feel. Even the myths that science disproves still serve a purpose. They are the scaffolding around which curiosity is built. Without them, perhaps fewer people would look up at the night sky or down into the depths of the earth. We are creatures of wonder. We need stories the way fire needs oxygen. The earth, too, seems to tell stories, though in a slower language. Its mountains rise like sentences. Its rivers flow like lines of verse. Its continents drift like the turning of pages. Antarctica, in that metaphor, is the final chapter, the one still sealed, waiting to be read. When we speak of the secrets beneath the ice, perhaps we are really speaking of that unread chapter. We imagine what it might say: a history of creation, a warning, a promise. But the truth is simpler and more profound. The ice does not hide messages. It is the message. It speaks of impermanence, of patience, of cycles that outlast civilizations. It tells us that everything, empires, myths, even species, are temporary, and that beauty lies not in permanence but in change. To sit in silence in that frozen world, to feel the air so still it becomes soundless, is to encounter the edge of thought itself. Many who have spent time in Antarctica describe a strange peace, a clarity that comes when the noise of the world falls away. It is in that clarity that understanding begins, not as answers, but as acceptance. The mysteries of Antarctica do not exist to be solved. They exist to remind us that some truths live beyond language. The ice beneath our feet is ancient. The stars above it are older still. Between them we exist, brief, questioning, luminous. And that is enough. If the earth could speak in words, perhaps it would say this: do not fear what you do not know. Do not rush to fill silence with noise. Listen, because mystery is not a wall, it is a door. And when we learn to open it without fear, we begin to see not only the world, but ourselves more clearly. In the end, all the myths of Admiral Byrd, of Atlantis, of pyramids and hidden beings are different ways of saying the same thing: that the world is larger than we can see, and that we are smaller than we imagine. They remind us that our understanding is a fragile light, flickering in a vast and ancient dark. But that light matters. It is what makes us human. We are the species that wonders. We are the children of curiosity. We are, in some quiet way, the consciousness of the earth itself, the part of it that asks, that dreams, that seeks to know. And so long as we continue to ask, the ice will continue to answer, not with words, but with silence. The silence is not empty. It is full of meaning. It says, remember. Remember that knowledge and humility are the same. Remember that every question is sacred. Remember that the earth, even in its coldest places, is alive. And if you listen closely through the whisper of wind and the crack of distant ice, you might hear it, the soft heartbeat of a planet that has been dreaming for billions of years, still waiting for us to awaken fully to its wonder. If you stand at the South Pole and turn slowly in a circle, every direction you face is north. There is no east or west, no sunrise or sunset. The compass loses meaning. The horizon dissolves into itself. It is, in a way, a perfect metaphor for knowledge. The closer you move toward the center of understanding, the less direction seems to matter. Every path leads outward again into new questions. And at that center, surrounded by nothing but ice and sky, one can feel the planet's rotation like a faint hum beneath the feet. A reminder that even in stillness, the world moves. Antarctica turns with us. It is the axis of the Earth's dreaming. We live in a world obsessed with certainty. We seek proof, evidence, conclusions. But the truth of existence has always been found not in certainty, but in balance, between knowing and not knowing, between light and shadow, between science and story. Antarctica stands precisely at that balance. It gives us data, pure, unbroken records of temperature, air, and time, and it gives us myth, the deep intuition that something more lies beneath its silence. The scientist and the poet are both pilgrims here. One drills into the ice, the other listens to it. And though their languages differ, their purpose is the same: to understand the world as fully as possible. The most profound discoveries often happen when those two ways of seeing meet, when the facts of science illuminate the metaphors of myth, and vice versa. To explore Antarctica is to explore both outer and inner worlds, to measure the frozen heart of the planet, and to reflect upon the frozen regions of our own minds. Time behaves differently in the cold. A snowflake that falls on the polar plateau may remain there for 1,000,000 years. Each new layer compresses the one below it until the oldest becomes ice as clear as glass. Beneath the surface, there is no sound, no movement, only pressure, the slow, patient weight of centuries. That is what we mean when we say deep time. It is not simply the passage of years, but the awareness that the planet thinks in eras, not moments. When we stand on the ice, we are standing on the remains of ancient skies, ancient seasons, ancient lives. And beneath that, perhaps, lie memories even older, the imprints of continents that once touched, oceans that once whispered across a different world. The mountains buried under Antarctica, the Gamburtsav Range, are as tall as the Alps, yet have never seen sunlight. They were formed before dinosaurs walked the earth, long before the ice entombed them. Their peaks are hidden, their valleys sealed, their rivers frozen in stone. If there is any sacred place on earth, it may be there, a cathedral of darkness, untouched since the dawn of time. When people speak of secrets beneath the ice, this is the true secret, that beneath our everyday perception lies a history so vast that it humbles the imagination. We do not need alien cities or lost civilizations to feel awe. The world itself is miraculous enough. Beneath 3 miles of ice, there are lakes that have not seen the open air for 15 million years. They are entire ecosystems sealed from the sun, living on minerals and pressure. In 2013, when researchers drilled into Lake Willans, they found microbial life, tiny, resilient beings that had survived in complete darkness, nourished only by the chemistry of rock and water. To those who hoped for evidence of extraterrestrials, this may have seemed mundane. But in truth, it was something far greater. It proved that life needs neither sunlight nor soil. It can thrive wherever energy exists. It can rewrite the definition of what it means to be alive. And so, in the frozen stillness of our own planet, we found a reflection of possibilities beyond it. Perhaps the story of Antarctica was never about what comes from the stars, but what the Earth itself is capable of creating. Every civilization has a place it cannot fully explain, a point on the map where the rational and the mysterious meet. For the Greeks, it was Delphi, where the voice of the earth spoke through a prophet's breath. For the Tibetans, it was Shambhala, hidden beyond mountains. For the Polynesians, it was the far horizon of the sea, where spirits and storms shared the same wind. For us, in this scientific age, it is Antarctica. We have mapped the stars, split the atom, sent machines to Mars, and yet, at the bottom of our own world, we still find a vast unknown. It is humbling and perhaps necessary that we do, because without mystery, progress becomes arrogance. Without wonder, knowledge becomes hollow. The ice reminds us that there will always be more to learn, more to imagine, more to respect. In ancient times, sailors believed the world was balanced, that the lands of the north were countered by an unseen continent in the south. They called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. They imagined it lush and warm, filled with strange animals and gold. They believed it existed to keep the planet stable, to balance the weight of the known. When Antarctica was finally discovered, it was not golden, but white, not fertile, but barren. And yet, in a deeper sense, those old mapmakers were right. It does balance the world, not with gold or soil, but with silence. It is the counterweight to all our noise, all our haste. In its emptiness, we find equilibrium. The modern myths of Antarctica, of UFOs, of hidden pyramids, of governments concealing secrets, may never fade entirely, because they serve a psychological purpose. They are not so much beliefs as symbols of our relationship with truth. The human mind resists the idea of pure indifference. We want the universe to care, to communicate, to mirror our own complexity. So when we encounter a continent that offers no explanation, no story, we create one for it. To some, that story becomes an alien base. To others, a portal to the inner earth. To others still, the last refuge of a vanished civilization. But what all those myths truly describe is our discomfort with silence. We would rather believe in gods beneath the ice than accept that the ice itself is enough. And yet, if we listen closely, we begin to hear that silence not as absence, but as presence. It is not the lack of meaning, but the purest form of it. The ice says nothing, and in that nothing we find peace. Perhaps that is the ultimate revelation, that Antarctica's greatest secret is not what lies beneath it, but what it teaches above it. It teaches patience, endurance, humility. It teaches that life does not need abundance to flourish, that beauty can exist in extremity, that knowledge and reverence are not opposites. It teaches that to explore is not to dominate, but to belong. Every flake of snow, every gust of wind, every glint of light on the frozen plain, all whisper the same lesson, that existence itself is miraculous, and that to witness it is enough. At night, the aurora australis shimmers above the horizon, ribbons of green and violet moving like breath. Scientists call it the result of solar particles colliding with the atmosphere. But to see it is to feel something older than explanation. The light seems alive, dancing to a rhythm beyond hearing. It arcs across the sky like memory, like thought, like the pulse of the universe itself. To watch it from the polar plateau is to understand why our ancestors filled the heavens with gods. In the absence of cities and sound, the sky becomes a cathedral, and beneath that shifting dome of color, the ice glows faintly, as if lit from within, as if remembering. The word Antarctica means opposite to the Arctic, but in another sense, it is opposite to all we think of as life. It is the inversion of comfort, of color, of sound. And yet, within that inversion lies balance. For without silence, we could not hear. Without darkness, there could be no light. The world needs its opposites, its poles, its contrasts, to stay whole. Antarctica is the counterpoint to civilization's noise. It is the world's deep inhale, balancing our constant exhale. When we listen to it, we hear not just the planet, but ourselves, the parts of us that are quiet, patient, and infinite. There is a story, whispered among polar researchers, of a moment that happens to everyone who stays there long enough. One day, while walking outside, surrounded by nothing but snow and sky, the person suddenly feels that the world has stopped. The wind pauses. The light freezes. The heart seems to slow. And in that moment, they feel completely alone, but also completely connected. It is not fear. It is not joy. It is something beyond words, a sense that everything, ice, sky, self, is part of one vast and living consciousness. Then the wind returns, the moment passes, and life continues. But they never forget it. Perhaps that is the true gift of Antarctica. It allows us to feel, for a heartbeat, the unity of all things. When humanity first dreamed of hidden realms beneath the earth, it was not seeking escape, it was seeking meaning. The inner world, we imagined, was always a metaphor for the depths within ourselves. And now, in the age of satellites and science, we have found that the earth does indeed have hidden worlds, not of crystal cities or masters, but of microscopic life, of geological memory, of frozen beauty. They are not less wondrous for being real. The truth, in its quiet way, has always been more miraculous than any fantasy. We once thought the world was flat. Then we thought it hollow. Now we know it is alive. And that realization, that the planet breathes, that it remembers, that it dreams, is the closest we may ever come to touching the divine. There comes a moment, after hours of silence on the ice, when you begin to hear things that are not really there. A hum in the wind, a whisper at the edge of perception, a rhythm so faint it might be your own pulse reflected by the landscape. It is then that you realize Antarctica is not empty. It is simply speaking in a language too slow for us to hear. The snow falls, grain by grain, over centuries. The glaciers move inch by inch toward the sea. The mountains rise, crumble, and rise again over spans of time that make our lives seem like single breaths. We are brief notes in the planet's long song, but to know that, to feel it, is not despair. It is peace, a kind of humility that frees us. The ice reminds us that we are temporary, but not insignificant. Every act of wonder, every gesture of curiosity, adds to the story of how the universe became conscious of itself. In the archives of explorers and scientists who came here, one finds a recurring word: silence. They describe it not as absence, but as presence. It presses against the skin, it fills the ears, it vibrates in the chest. In a place without trees, without birds, without cities, the silence becomes substance. It is like standing inside a thought before it becomes words. Some say that the silence of Antarctica is what inspired them to see the world differently. Once they returned home, to hear the quiet patterns behind the noise of daily life, to sense the pulse of the planet beneath the hum of machines. That is the true transformation of the polar journey. Not discovery, but awakening. The explorers of the past sought new lands. The explorers of the future seek new ways of seeing. And Antarctica, patient and infinite, welcomes both. It's easy to forget that this frozen land was once vibrant. Long before the ice, before the cold, before the world as we know it, Antarctica was forest. 300 million years ago, the supercontinent Gondwana stretched across the southern hemisphere. What we now call Antarctica was then a lush expanse of rivers and swamps. Ferns reached skyward. Insects shimmered in humid air. Even as the poles tilted into darkness for months at a time, plants adapted, growing in cycles we can barely imagine. Fossils of those forests remain, hidden in the rock. Petrified wood lies buried under glaciers. The seeds of tropical trees, once rooted in the same ground, that now sleeps beneath miles of snow. To stand there, knowing this, is to feel the layered memory of Earth, life upon life, age upon age, all preserved in cold silence. The continent is not dead, it is dreaming. The dreams of the planet are long. They move through eons, not seasons. If we could listen to the ice not in seconds, but in millennia, we might hear it breathe. A slow inhale of snow, a long exhale of melt. Perhaps that rhythm is what has always drawn us to the poles. The earth itself calls to us in the language of patience. When Admiral Byrd wrote about the land beyond the pole, he may have been feeling that pulse, the sense that the world extends not only outward, but inward into layers of history and time that we can only imagine. He may have felt, as so many explorers have, that the true beyond is not physical, but spiritual. That to cross the ice is to cross a boundary of understanding, to glimpse, for a moment, what it means to belong to a planet rather than to a nation. In that sense, the myths that grew around him of secret lands and inner worlds were not lies. They were metaphors misunderstood. The hidden world beneath the ice is not a hollow earth filled with civilizations. It is the memory of the world before us, the echo of what the planet once was. When we imagine entrances to another realm, what we are really imagining is entry into deep time, into the continuum that connects the past, present, and future in a single living organism called Earth. Science and myth are simply two ways of touching that mystery. Science measures. Myth feels. Both listen. And in Antarctica, both find the same answer: stillness. Stillness is not the opposite of life. It is its foundation. Without it, there can be no growth, no rhythm, no renewal. The ice teaches us this lesson perfectly. It seems unmoving, yet beneath it are rivers that flow, lakes that shimmer, and mountains that shift. Stillness is not lack of motion. It is motion so slow it becomes sacred. That is why Antarctica holds such power over the imagination. It represents the part of existence that does not rush, that endures, that remembers. In our world of constant noise and speed, the continent is an anchor. It reminds us that slowness is wisdom, that silence is strength. There are places on Earth where the boundary between the physical and the spiritual seems thinner, where one feels the pulse of something vast and unseen. Antarctica is one of them. Standing there, you sense that the world is not just matter and energy, but consciousness, that the planet itself is aware, in ways we do not yet understand. The ancient myths that spoke of the earth as a living being, Gaia, Pachamama, the mother, may not have been symbolic after all. Modern science now speaks of the Earth system, the interplay of atmosphere, ocean, rock, and life, all influencing one another in delicate feedback loops. But what is that, if not the physiology of a living organism? The glaciers are its lungs. The oceans are its blood. The forests are its veins. The storms are its heartbeat. And the poles, the frozen ends of the world, are its memory. They record everything, quietly, faithfully, waiting for us to learn how to read them. To look at Antarctica, then, is to look at the planet's own mind, a place of clarity, of silence, of deep introspection. It does not speak often, but when it does, its voice is unmistakable. Sometimes it speaks in the crack of ice, in the slow drift of glaciers, in the rising sea. Sometimes it speaks in the magnetic hum of the aurora, in the way light bends over the horizon. And sometimes it speaks through us, through the stories we tell, the questions we ask, the awe we feel when we glimpse its endless white. We are part of its language. Every story we invent about Antarctica, every myth of lost cities or hidden powers, is an echo of that voice. The myths are not mistakes. They are translations. We took the deep truth that the earth is alive and mysterious, and rendered it into symbols we could grasp. We gave the ice a name, a purpose, a narrative. We made it human, because that is how we make sense of wonder. But as our science grows more precise, our myths grow more subtle. We no longer need gods in the ice to feel reverence. The physics of glaciers, the chemistry of ancient air, the biology of extremophile microbes, these are miracles enough. They tell the same story the myths once told, that the universe is creative, persistent, and full of secrets. That life, even in the coldest places, continues. In that realization lies a quiet kind of faith, not faith in the supernatural, but faith in the continuity of being. Faith that the world will keep turning. Faith that memory endures. Faith that wonder will outlast us. For as long as there are minds to listen, the ice will keep whispering. And even when we are gone, the planet will continue to write, with wind and snow, with mountain and tide, the never-ending story of itself. The true history of Antarctica is not one of hidden civilizations or secret empires. It is the history of patience. It is the story of how the earth stores its memory in silence, and how we, fragile and curious, have begun to hear it. When scientists extract an ice core and hold it up to the light, they are holding time itself, a column of frozen air older than human language. It is humbling to think that within that narrow cylinder are answers to questions we have only just begun to ask. What was the world like before we existed? How did life adapt to ice, to fire, to darkness? What will become of us when the climate shifts again? These are not conspiracies. They are confessions. The planet reminding us that it has always changed and that we are part of that change. To meditate on Antarctica is to meditate on impermanence. Even the ice that feels eternal is moving, melting, transforming. It is a mirror held up to the truth that all things, species, empires, ideas, are temporary. But there is comfort in that truth, because if nothing lasts forever, then everything matters more. Every kindness, every discovery, every breath of curiosity becomes precious. The ice does not promise immortality. It promises remembrance. And remembrance, perhaps, is enough. When the last explorers of the age of ice stood at the pole, they often left small markers, flags, notes, photos sealed in tins, not as claims, but as messages to whoever might come after. Each one said, in its own way, we were here. We witnessed this. We tried to understand. That is the same message humanity leaves in every place it touches: the moon, the deep sea, the stars. It is a testament not to conquest, but to wonder. Antarctica will one day erase those traces, covering them again with snow. But the act of leaving them, of reaching out across the silence, will always matter. Because to seek knowledge, even knowing it will fade, is the essence of being human. And so the ice will remember us, not in monuments or myths, but in the invisible layer of air we've added to the sky, in the warmth that reaches even the poles in the story of a species that once wondered what lay beneath. In the end, perhaps that is Antarctica's greatest secret, that it does not need to hide anything. It is the secret, the living proof that beauty can exist without witness, that mystery can endure without explanation, that the world is far larger and more delicate than we can ever grasp. When we finally understand that, we no longer need myths of hollow earths or hidden cities. We need only stand in the cold, look at the light, and listen. The silence will do the rest. When the sun returns to Antarctica after months of darkness, it does not rise suddenly. It hovers, a pale glow at the edge of the world, faint as memory. Then, slowly, it climbs, brushing the ice with gold, waking the mountains from their long blue sleep. Those who witness that sunrise often describe it as the most moving moment of their lives, not because of what it reveals, but because of what it reminds them, that light always returns. Even at the end of the earth, even after the longest night, warmth finds its way back. It is the same story the planet has told for billions of years: darkness and light, ice and thaw, silence and song. The same rhythm that moves through galaxies moves through snowflakes. Everything breathes, everything changes, everything returns. To watch the polar sunrise is to see time itself made visible. The light crawls across the horizon like a slow tide, revealing ridges and shadows, turning glaciers into mirrors. And for a few moments, the entire continent glows, not white, but rose and amber, as if the world itself were blushing at its own beauty. Then the wind returns. The snow swirls. The light hardens again into cold. But the memory of that color lingers. Proof that even in the most desolate place, there are miracles waiting for those who stay still long enough to see them. It is a fitting metaphor for knowledge. Revelation comes quietly, in moments, then vanishes again beneath the ordinary. To seek truth, we must learn to wait. Every human generation has inherited the same paradox, the desire to know everything, and the inability to accept how little we can truly know. The myths of Antarctica, in all their strange and beautiful variations, are expressions of that paradox. They tell us that beneath the visible world lies another, richer one, hidden, perfect, eternal. Whether that realm is imagined as a hollow earth, a lost Atlantis, or a base of otherworldly beings, the impulse is the same: to believe that the world still contains wonder, that mystery still lives somewhere unmeasured. But what if that hidden world was never separate from us at all? What if it was this one, the same glaciers, the same mountains, the same vast silence, seen with the right kind of reverence? Perhaps the myth was always true, just misunderstood. Perhaps the secret beneath the ice is not a place, but a perspective. In that sense, Antarctica has always been both mirror and teacher. It shows us who we are, when everything unnecessary is stripped away. It reveals what remains when noise, comfort, and illusion fall silent. What remains is curiosity, the same impulse that led our ancestors to draw stars on cave walls, that drove ships across uncharted seas, that sent telescopes into the heavens, that same quiet hunger for understanding pulses beneath our skin. We are explorers not by choice, but by nature. We look outward because something within us remembers what it felt like to look up at the first dawn and wonder. Antarctica, in all its emptiness, reflects that back to us. It says, you are still that same creature. You are still learning how to see. The more we learn about this frozen world, the more it humbles us. We have discovered mountains taller than the Alps buried beneath miles of ice. We have found subglacial lakes teeming with unseen life. We have drilled into cores that hold air breathed by creatures long extinct. We have mapped the magnetic anomalies that hint at ancient impact craters and traced the slow drift of continents that once formed a single living land. And yet, even with all this knowledge, we still stand at the edge of unknowing. For every answer the ice gives, it asks another question. And maybe that is the point. Knowledge, after all, is not a destination. It is a path. When we think of the explorers, Amundsen, Scott, Shackleton, Byrd, we tend to remember their courage, their endurance, their triumphs and tragedies. But what truly unites them is not what they found, but what they felt. They stood before the unknown, and they kept going. They faced silence so vast it could crush the mind, and yet they walked into it willingly. That courage, the courage to not know and to continue anyway, is what defines us. It is what defines science, philosophy, and myth alike. The quest for knowledge is, at its heart, an act of faith. Faith that the universe is worth understanding. Faith that the effort itself matters. Antarctica is our cathedral for that faith. Its ice is the altar, its wind the hymn, its silence the prayer. When the world feels chaotic, when the noise of human life drowns out all clarity, one can look to Antarctica for perspective. The storms there rage without hatred. The ice moves without hurry. The cold arrives without malice. It is a place beyond morality, beyond meaning, and yet somehow full of both. Because in its neutrality, it reveals what is essential. It reminds us that we are part of something ancient, vast, and cyclical. That every breath we take is connected to the glaciers melting, to the oceans rising, to the winds that circle the poles. It reminds us that life and death, creation and destruction, are not opposites, but two faces of the same process. And in that reminder lies serenity. If the myths of hidden civilizations comforted our ancestors, perhaps our modern myth is this: that we can live in harmony with the earth, that we can learn from its patience instead of testing it, that we can act as caretakers rather than conquerors. Antarctica shows us that such harmony is possible. The Antarctic Treaty, signed by nations who had once been enemies, proves that cooperation can exist even in the harshest conditions, that knowledge can unite where politics divide. For more than 6 decades, this agreement has held. No wars, no borders, no exploitation, only science and peace. It may be the quietest success in human history. And it began here, at the bottom of the world, where the ice taught us humility. Humility, that is the true secret. Not the myths of hollow worlds or alien watchers, but the simple recognition that we are small, and that smallness is sacred. When we look upon the frozen horizon, we see the truth of our existence reflected, brief, fragile, luminous. And in that brevity lies beauty, because it means that everything, every sunrise, every act of kindness, every question we ask, matters infinitely more. The ice teaches us not to seek immortality, but meaning, not to conquer time, but to leave something worth remembering, even if that something is only wonder. There is a thought that comes to many who stand alone on the polar plateau, that perhaps the Earth itself dreams through us, that our curiosity, our stories, our search for truth, all of it is the planet's own consciousness, waking up for a moment to see itself. If that is so, then Antarctica is the place where the Earth dreams most deeply, the place where silence gives birth to thought, and thought gives birth to reverence. The myths we tell about it are not mistakes. They are love letters. Love letters from a species trying to describe the feeling of standing at the edge of eternity. As the world warms, the ice retreats. The secrets buried for millions of years begin to surface. We find ancient sediments, fossils of forests, and the chemical fingerprints of climates long gone. And within those discoveries, a question lingers, not of what lies beneath, but of what comes next. Will we learn from the patience of the ice? Or will we melt faster than we can understand? The answer, perhaps, depends on whether we remember what Antarctica truly is. Not a place of mystery to be solved, but a teacher to be listened to. Its silence is instruction. Its endurance is lesson. Its beauty is truth. In the long future, long after our species has changed or vanished, the ice will still move. New snows will fall, new glaciers will form, and the world will continue its slow, majestic cycle of becoming. Perhaps some future intelligence, human or otherwise, will find traces of us in the layers of ice. They will study our air, our artifacts, our warmth, and wonder who we were. They will see that once, for a brief moment, the Earth dreamed of itself through us, a fragile, curious species that tried to understand why the world was so beautiful. And maybe that will be enough. Because even the smallest spark of understanding, the briefest act of wonder, adds to the universe's own awareness. Antarctica holds that spark in its frozen heart. So when we ask, what is the secret beneath the ice? The answer is simple and infinite. The secret is memory. The secret is patience. The secret is wonder. It is the way the planet holds its past and its future in one vast breath of frost. It is the way life endures, even in darkness. It is the way we keep asking questions, even when no answer comes. The secret is not hidden. It is all around us, waiting for us to slow down enough to see it. If you ever find yourself imagining Antarctica, the wind, the silence, the endless white, think of it not as the edge of the world, but as its beginning. For in that silence, the story of Earth is still being written. Every flake of snow that falls, there is a syllable in that story. Every gust of wind is punctuation. Every melt and freeze is another line. And we, standing far away, are part of that story too, readers and writers of the same eternal book. So let us end as we began, in quiet awe. Antarctica is not a conspiracy. It is a mirror. It reflects our fears, our hopes, our endless need to understand. It shows us that even in the coldest places, there is light. Even in silence, there is song. Even beneath the ice, there is life. The Earth keeps its secrets not to hide them from us, but to invite us to keep looking. Because the act of looking, of wondering, of seeking, is what makes us human. And somewhere beneath the ice, the planet smiles. Night drifts once more across the ice. The sun lowers to the horizon and lingers there, reluctant to leave. A thin band of gold circles the world, the last thread of warmth before the long winter returns. The wind rises, soft at first, then steady a whisper that becomes a song. The snow begins to move again, reshaping everything it touches. Paths vanish, footprints blur. Even the memory of motion dissolves into stillness. The continent exhales. In this moment, as light fades from the sky and silence folds over the world, we stand at the threshold between what has been seen and what remains unknown. Antarctica has always been that threshold. It is the meeting point between time and timelessness, between what we can measure and what we can only feel. Every expedition, every theory, every story told about this place is, at its heart, a conversation with the unknown. For some, that conversation takes the form of date numbers written on paper, graphs that trace the slow changes of the planet. For others, it takes the form of myth images of lost continents, hollow worlds, and beings who wait beneath the snow. But whether spoken in equations or in poetry, the message is the same. The Earth is more than we can comprehend. We are students in an endless classroom, listening to lessons taught in the language of wind and water. When the first explorers returned from the ice, their journals were filled with contradictions. They wrote of terror and beauty, of emptiness and fullness, of a silence so profound it felt alive. They could not explain why such a barren place had moved them so deeply. Perhaps it is because the ice strips away the illusion of control. Here, human power means nothing. The weather does not bend to will. The cold does not compromise. And yet, amid that surrender, there is liberation. To stand on that vast plain is to understand that life persists not because of dominance, but because of balance. It is to see that fragility and strength are not opposites, but partners in the same dance. The ice does not resist change. It becomes it. In our time, we measure that change with satellites and sensors. We see the ice sheets thinning, the glaciers retreating, the sea rising. We chart it in data, in degrees, in millimeters per year. But perhaps, beyond the graphs, there is another kind of measurement, the one taken in the heart. It is the measure of how deeply we feel our connection to the world we are altering. Every calving glacier is not just an environmental event. It is a sentence in the Earth's story, being rewritten before our eyes. And though the tone of that story is uncertain, it is not without hope. For hope, like ice, is never truly gone. It melts, it moves, it reforms. The planet, in its vast patience, reminds us that repair is possible, that renewal is written into the structure of things. At the stations scattered across the continent, small groups of people keep watch through the polar night. They monitor instruments, record temperatures, collect samples. Outside their windows, the aurora moves like breath. Inside, the hum of machines becomes a kind of heartbeat. Each of them carries a quiet understanding that what they are doing matters, even if no one sees it. They are caretakers of memory. And in their work, meticulous, repetitive, humble, we find the purest form of exploration. Not the conquest of the unknown, but communion with it. The myths will never truly vanish. They will shift, evolve, find new forms. Someone will always look at the ice and imagine more. And perhaps that is good, because imagination is how knowledge begins. Every scientific discovery was once a story that seemed impossible. Every expedition began as a dream. The line between myth and science is thinner than we think. One names what it feels. The other explains what it finds. Both are acts of wonder. And wonder is what keeps us moving forward toward the stars, toward the depths, toward ourselves. Sometimes, late in the polar night, the sky clears and the stars appear with such clarity that they seem almost near enough to touch. There are so many that they no longer look like points, but like dust in ocean of light stretching in every direction. In that view, distance loses meaning. The galaxy becomes a single shimmer, and the planet beneath it seems impossibly small. But small does not mean insignificant. It means precious. It means every heartbeat, every question, every fragile attempt to understand the world is a light of its own tiny, but real. Antarctica reminds us of that. It reminds us that to be small is not to be lost. It is to belong. If one listens closely, there is a rhythm that unites everything, the slow pulse of glaciers, the turn of the earth, the breath of the sea. It is the same rhythm that beats within us. We are not separate from the planet. We are expressions of it. Our thoughts are as natural as the wind, our dreams as ancient as the tide. When we forget this, we feel alone. When we remember, we feel awe. And awe is the first step toward wisdom. Perhaps that is what all the myths were trying to tell us. that the hidden world beneath the ice was never about geography, it was about consciousness, about the depths we have yet to explore within ourselves. The explorers searched for passages to another realm, but the true passage is inward, the journey from fear to understanding, from isolation to belonging. Antarctica simply provides the mirror. It shows us, in perfect silence, what we are too distracted to see elsewhere, that the world is alive, that we are part of it, that the mystery we seek is the same mystery that breathes through us. The wind moves again. The snow begins to fall. The light fades until the horizon dissolves into shadow. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel the earth turning beneath your feet, the long, slow rotation that has carried every dawn, every civilization, every story. It will carry others after us. That is the beauty and the sorrow of existence, that everything ends, but nothing is ever lost. It all becomes part of the pattern. The ice remembers, the oceans remember, the stars remember, and in their memory we endure. So as this journey ends, let us return to where it began. A question whispered into the cold. What lies beneath the ice? The answer, now, feels simple. Beneath the ice lies the memory of a living world. Beneath the ice lies proof that change is eternal. Beneath the ice lies silence, teaching us how to listen. Beneath the ice lies ourselves. For we, too, are layers of time, of memory, of hope moving slowly through the ages, carrying within us the story of the world that made us. And so, as the last words fade and the snow continues to fall, we offer gratitude to the explorers who walked into the unknown, guided by faith in discovery, to the scientists who read the ice like scripture, searching for truth in frozen light, to the storytellers who kept wonder alive through myth and dream, and to the earth itself, which continues to create, to destroy, to remember. Thank you for your silence. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your beauty. We are listening. One day, long after we are gone, the ice will melt, refreeze, and melt again. The seas will rise and fall. The continents will drift. New forms of life will emerge, carrying traces of what we were. They will inherit a planet still whispering its secrets into the wind. And somewhere, under layers of snow and stone, our echoes will remain footsteps, artifacts, perhaps even words frozen in air. They will not tell a story of power, but of wonder, of a species that once looked at the frozen horizon and tried to understand its own reflection. That, more than anything, is our legacy. We wondered. The wind quiets. The stars shimmer. The ice, vast and silver, stretches to every horizon. The world exhales. And for a moment, one long, luminous moment, it feels as if the planet itself is dreaming of us. Perhaps it always has.